This is Julian speaking, welcoming you to another video out of the breach. The story of Eric the Unsure ends, and I want to present you the last part of the story. It was a wonderful event, and I want to thank everyone who participated in any shape or form. And now, grab a drink of your choosing, or your paintbrush, or both, and enjoy the last part of the story. Part 5. A Year and a Day.
Eric, the Baron wants to see you.
Smitherington Smythe, the butler, called from the gateway into the firing range. He waited until Eric acknowledged his words with a wave, then pointed his nose in the air and scurried off.
Come back when you're ready, lad.
Flintlock smiled and carefully lifted the large musket rifle from its stand.
Oh dear, I wonder what's that all about?
Eric wiped sweat from his forehead, his skin lightly tender from the searing summer heat. Flintlock shrugged.
You've been training hard for nearly a year. Maybe he wants to talk to you about that.
Excitement alit in Eric's belly.
You think so?
Flintlock shrugged again.
Maybe. You better put a shirt on before you go to see him, though.
Eric laughed and scooped his shirt from over the fence. He caught the eye of a stable hand, and she quickly looked away. Was she staring at me? He thought, and shrugged into his shirt, tucking it into his trousers. Maybe that was the fox woman. Carefully he pulled the carved stag skull necklace from under his shirt, looking for her. She didn't appear again, so he shrugged, waved at Flintlock, and strode back towards the house. After squinting in the sunlight, the dim interior of the house was a stark contrast. Blinking his swimming vision, he wandered to the office and knocked.
"Enter!"
the Baron barked from inside. Eric pushed inside and closed the door quietly behind him, then strode to stand in front of the Baron's desk. The Baron glanced up, yet his ledger kept his attention. Discomfort and apprehension battled in Eric's stomach. He distracted himself by rubbing at the dirty yellow spot on the skull necklace. The unusual magic had pierced his chest a few months before and left no mark on his skin, yet the necklace remained stained. The Baron cleared his throat and said, "Are you quite well now, after all that business a few months ago?" Eric released the necklace. "Almost, but not fully." The Baron kept his eyes down, still scribbling in his book. "I wanted to thank you for your help over the past year or so." Eric was so surprised he thought he would fall over. "It's been a bit of a whirlwind, so I've not really had the time to say anything." "Thank you, sir," Eric grinned. "Yes, well..." The Baron finally placed his quill on the table and closed the book. "There was something else I wished to discuss with you in any case." Pride glimmered in Eric's chest, and he couldn't help but grin wider. "Of course, sir. How can I help?" "You've been training hard for many months, many years in fact, and you're almost ready to become a knight." Disappointment started chewing at the pride. "Almost, sir?" "Oh yes, I think a few more months will see you there. By then, the council will be ready to discuss certain matters about Tauber with you and the broader population." "All right," Eric frowned. "For now, I wanted to talk to you about your demeanor these past few weeks." "My demeanor?" "Yes. Ever since you got back from that cult, you've been aloof with me and other people in the household. Eric clenched his jaw, thinking, yes, because it's difficult to tell people in the Commonwealth that you were a vessel for a god they don't understand. Then, in the past few days, I've had complaints from people saying that you've been looking at them strangely, staring too long into their eyes, making them uncomfortable. Eric felt his heart had stopped, disappointment and embarrassment smoothing it into stillness. You need to think about the proper way a knight should behave and consider taking off that necklace. The Baron flicked his hand at Eric's chest and sat back in his chair. Eric took a deep breath, considering how to respond. And what about the behavior of others within the Commonwealth? You raised me to believe in integrity, that the Commonwealth are the good guys. Yet Caldus wanted to leave the gnomes on that island. Caldus was doing what he thought was best, so that you could rescue Ermentrude. Given the cost to the Commonwealth as a result of that mission, perhaps you should have listened to him. Eric shook his head, anger simmering, and he blurted, When are you going to tell people about those shades that have appeared? How many people have they attacked while the council has done nothing? The Baron rose in a fluid motion, his cheeks pink. How did you know about that? It's a council secret. I know quite a few secrets now, sir. Eric stared at the Baron, folding his arms to mask his shaking hands. The Baron looked confused, then paled and turned away from him. I think you best go and resume your chores, Squire. We should continue this conversation later. Fine. Eric turned, opening the door a crack. Eric? Eric looked over his shoulder at the Baron. The older man looked tired. Whatever you think might be going on, he sighed. You really will be a knight soon. I promise. I know, Eric said, closing the door behind him. Eric took himself into the weirdwood under the pretense of collecting firewood. He marched through the undergrowth, ignoring fallen branches, striding towards a small lake in a clearing. He'd visited it many times as part of his training, and he thought, hopefully it'll be quiet and I can go for a swim. By the time he reached the lake, sweat had soaked through his shirt, and he pulled it over his head, discarding it in a pile by a tree. It's nice to see you too, Rick. The voice took him by surprise, and he spun towards the sound. The young red-haired woman was sitting under a hawthorn tree, eating wild strawberries. She smiled at him and gestured for him to sit near her. He scrutinized her for a long moment, then strode across and sat down opposite her. Your name is Janya, isn't it? She popped another berry into her mouth. Yes, it is. He thought for a moment, watching her as she chewed on the strawberries. This human woman appearance isn't your true form, is it? She smiled more broadly, showing surprisingly pointed canines. No, it isn't. Although I can take many forms. Her skin quivered like heat haze, and suddenly Herbert was eating berries. Then his skin shivered, and Belle, the gnome with a backpack, was there. Her skin shivered again, and Callista winked at him, her antlers swaying. Her skin shivered a final time, and a fox woman was set in front of him. Her body was covered in soft orange fur, her face a pointed fox snout and a fluffy tail curled into her lap. Yet her hands were dexterous like a human's, which she demonstrated by throwing another berry into her mouth. She was wearing the same fern-green dress as her human guise. "Is this it? Your true form?" She shrugged. "This is the form I favor, although no mortal has seen my true form." Eric leaned away from her and asked, "What are you?" Dranya laughed and said, "Get Noel to tell you the next time you meet." "Gwendoline said you're a trickster. Is that true?" "I do like a giggle." She winked at him, throwing a strawberry upwards. She snapped it out of the air and chewed it happily. "What have you done to me over the past year?" Eric asked miserably, his hand on the hilt of his wooden sword. "Oh, Rick, please. I've not done anything to you. You've done it all yourself." "But you appeared sometimes, took over people I know." "Yes, but only to nudge you or show you that something important was happening. I wanted to make you think." Eric scowled. "That doesn't make any sense. Are you lying to me?" Dranya held his gaze for the first time, and anger glimmered there. "I may be a trickster, but I'm not a liar. Not about things like this, in any case." Eric looked away from her eyes and thought, she might be lying about lying. But for some reason, I want to trust her. She brushed her hands together and made a satisfying sound before looking at him seriously. "Sir Eric of the Lake, it's been a year and a day since we first met. Are you ready to make your choice?" Nerves jangled his stomach, but his voice was steady as he asked, "What choice?" She chuckled. "You cannot trick a trickster. You know what choice you must make." Dranya brought a simple leather bag in front of her and riffled inside. First, she lifted out a golden egg, followed by a duck feather, and carefully placed them on the ground between them. Next, a glass bottle of faintly reddish water. Finally, a large handful of pungent incense consisting of dried herbs, flowers, and chunks of resin. He looked at the items in turn, memories dragging feelings through his body. What a year it's been. Dranya held a red glazed goblet towards him and said, "Eric, take this goblet of the squire, and we will prepare you for your knighthood." Eric stared at the goblet in silence and shook his head. Her head twitched in response, and she narrowed her eyes. Taking a deep breath, Eric said, "I'll do this if you tell me one thing." "I make no bargain until I know what it is." Her smile was brittle. "On this path you've nudged me along. I've discovered my mother's name. Do you know my father's?" Her smile broadened into an unsettling grin. "Ah, you wish a trade? I'll give you his name, but not in exchange for this." She gestured at the items in front of her. Why not?" "You will find this without me. It'll take longer and be more painful, but helping you make a decision gives me very little reward." "So, why are you doing it then?" Dranya placed a hand on her chest and fluttered her eyelashes. "For the good of Tauber." Eric looked at her skeptically. "All right. Because it's fun to get involved in the big things on Tauber. That, and by helping you, I'll be upsetting some that want to try to coerce you and your decision. I think it's important for people to have free will, and it's always fun to mess with those who like to be in control." She giggled, and her tail flicked excitedly. "All right. Fine. I believe you. What do you want in return, then?" She ran her hand under her chin. Oh, now this is a secret, Rick. A secret can only be bought with another secret. Eric frowned. I don't know any secrets. Not interesting ones in any case. You could owe me a secret. She smiled sweetly again, her tail still flicking. All right, in return for 3 questions. Agreed. That's simple enough. Do you promise also? I promise. The air around them fizzed, and Eric felt tingling across his skin. Dranya clenched her fist, drawing the magic from the air, and the tingling stopped. The promise is bound, and you will pay me with 1 secret when I ask for it. I will, Eric nodded. She gave him a knowing smile and said, What are your 3 questions? What is my father's name? Kenneth Brown. Eric rubbed at his forehead, overwhelmed by such a simple information. Next question. We don't have all day. Oh, how did he know my mother? They met when they were both in service at the Fancyhead household. Kenneth Brown was a butler to Archibald Fancyhead. Sarah Dolan was handmaiden to Joyce Ann Fancyhead. Final question. Did he know about me before he left? Dranya pursed her lips, an unusual expression on a fox's face. He knew Sarah was pregnant, but left before you were born. There, 3 questions, done and done. Squeezing his eyes closed, Eric rested his head in his hands. I know so much after years of knowing nothing. When he sat up straight, Dranya was holding the goblet towards him. It's time, Eric of the Lake. You must choose your path. He took the goblet from her and felt magic tingling across his skin again. What must I do? She held the golden egg out to him and said, The path to Eric the Formidable. Tell me why you would walk it. Eric took the egg and looked at it while he said, The Dominion have always been drawn to me, in their own strange ways. I could learn magic, but with the freedom of thought and action, I could be a noble one day. Most importantly, I respect my friend Herbert and would like to fight by his side. Instinctively, he broke the egg into the goblet, thinking about what he had said. She handed him the bottle of water. The path to Eric the Brave. Tell me why you would walk it. Eric considered the water and the merfolk blood inside, which he now knew the reddish-brown to be. The Commonwealth are my family. I've always wanted to be their knight, always felt it's the path of goodness. It's the logical choice. He poured some of the water into the goblet, his vision blurry from unspilled tears. After a moment, Dranya held out a handful of incense. The path to Eric the Enlightened. Tell me why you would walk it. Carefully, Eric took the incense and inhaled its scent. Was Leshevitz chosen? He smiled and dropped the incense into the mixture. Dranya regarded him for a long moment, then handed him the duck feather, and instinctively he stirred the gloopy mixture in the goblet. He thought about everything that had happened over the past year and wondered what would come next. Dranya muttered something in an unusual language while he stirred, the magical pressure building. Green sparkles danced from the mixture, and Dranya cupped her hands around Eric's. He stopped stirring, and they both stared into the swirling mixture, magic thumbing around them. Gently, Dranya guided him to standing. Eric, in order to complete this ritual, you must cast aside your life as a squire. You must be reborn through the lake. She looked down and waggled her eyebrows at him. Eric smiled, surprised he was no longer embarrassed, and unbuckled his belt. He pulled it from around his waist and grasped the dangling scabbard, nostalgia nagging at his core. He drew and examined the wooden sword, and it was still sharp after Calder's ministrations. He could remember how it received every scratch and dent, and the dark blood stains that never quite came out from the grain. He clutched it to his chest, smiled sadly, then tossed it into the lake. He finished stripping and stood, surveying the mirrored surface of the water, the sword sinking to the bottom. On the opposite bank, an enormous elk appeared, lowering his head to drink the cool water. Eric watched him drink, the strength in his powerful muscles clear even from the distance. Yet he was graceful and calm, a truly noble beast. The elk lifted his great head, his eyes meeting Eric's for a long moment. The wooden necklace around Eric's neck grew warm, glowing with soft green light. Without looking, he grasped it and lifted his fist to rest on his lips. Dranya stepped beside him and asked softly, "Do you wish to remove the necklace?" Eric shook his head, smiling. He said, "No." The necklace glowed brighter, hot against his palm, and he laughed heartily. Eric's laughter was sucked into a gasp as Dranya poured the mixture from the goblet over his head. He thought, she'd better have done this for a good reason. Eric of the Glade, Eric of the Lake, Eric the Enlightened, you have made your choice. Enter the water, and when you emerge, you will be a true knight. Dranya nodded to him and took a step backwards. A grin spread across her face, and she watched him intently, her eyes sparkling mischievously. The mixture was sticky and slid slowly down Eric's hair and over his skin, but it was warm and smelled of woodlands, rain, soil, clear air on a summer's evening, wood smoke, and mushrooms. His necklace glowed green, the wave of pulsing light brighter with each flash. The light spread to the mixture and then onto his skin. Eric lifted a hand to examine his glowing arm. Smiling, he closed his eyes and felt his mind go quiet for the first time in a very long while. Eventually he strode into the lake, brought his glowing arms over his head, and dove into the cool water. It was dark, still and quiet, and he let himself think, my choice is the Lesherwood, and whatever that may bring. To be continued.